Let's talk about exactly what is happening to your Airbnb business right now. We're going to go over the economics of what happens when people cancel, what that does to you, how you should operate your business. This is not uncommon, actually. This has happened in history many times before. We're going to talk about supply and demand in a way you've probably never heard it explained. My name's Sean Rakijic, Airbnb Automated, and let's teach you how to manage your calendar through a crisis. Welcome back, Airbnb family. Can you believe I'm recording this video at an airport? It's like dead here. It's a ghost town. And so word on the street from some employees from one of the airlines is they think domestic travel will close this weekend. And so I'm making it back to Texas on time. So I will see you all in Texas. With that said, though, a lot of people are freaking out, and for good reason. And I told a reporter this before, that a lot of you hosts out there are Airbnb hosts because Airbnb got you on the train. Right? You weren't a professional short-term rental owner prior. Airbnb kind of created the opportunity for you, and you've only learned as much as you really needed to survive. So we're kind of in this new spot now, aren't we, where you've never learned how to manage a crisis. And reservation, like your strategy, like your revenue management strategy and your occupancy strategy are things that you were maybe have seen like a couple videos on this channel on, maybe did like a nod to it, but they really haven't dug deep because you didn't think this was going to happen, right? So a lot of people are in some new territory here. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you how to look at supply and demand the right way, and where this is going to be hard and what you should do about it, because there's going to be some avoidable obstacles here, and we've kind of hit some of them already, but there is a way through this to create a best case scenario, and that's really what you want to work towards. So before we jam on some facts, of course, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and are of course wanting to know all about how to host, and share this with your host friends that are having a hard time. This is going to be extremely important. So now, supply and demand. There's been a debate on this. People are saying that it's not supply that's gone up, it's just demand that's gone down. And that is half true. Demand has gone down a little bit. And so let me explain supply and demand like this. You have daily inquiries with the intention to book property, right? So you have units of demand, or people like, I want to book a space for either today, tomorrow, the future. And then you have units available. Now, what I want you to understand here is that units available is not simply just homes, okay? It's not that there's 6 million listings on Airbnb, but each listing has days available. So we're going to talk about doors per day. Each day per door is a unit of stock, right? A unit of supply. And when somebody goes to book, they'll go to book for 1, 2, 5, 20, 50 days. And so their units of demand is equivalent to their stay length, right? And that's why in our previous videos on slow season strategy, we recommend to you that you try to get long bookings first and prioritize long bookings, because a customer brings a booking. And if there's less customers on the platform in slow season, you want to find the ones that have the most units of demand and get them to book with you, because you can fill up your entire calendar. You're getting more units from them. What has happened here is there's been a spike of supply. It's not that there's a bunch of new units that came on. By no means. There's not a ton of people adding Airbnb properties right now. That's not what's happening to us. But what happened is as days go by, you're going to have these units of demand, and they're going to meet supply, and they're going to come up with an agreement, and then they go away. The thing, though, is that once days pass by, they're no longer demand or supply. It's in the past. So a lot of this stuff is like in real time. So today, we have units of demand for either today or dates into the future, okay? And so the units of demand are distributed throughout the whole potential life cycle of your property, and demand or supply comes on the market whenever there's a new listing or listings have new dates available. So as we go forward in time, today becomes yesterday, that supply leaves the market, and new future dates come onto the market. A lot of us have like settings where people can book 6 months in advance or a year in advance. So your calendar puts that next day on the market, and it becomes available supply. So what happens is when demand meets supply and they make an agreement, and then the supply is reserved, even though that date is like 3 months in the future, there's no longer that unit of demand or that unit of supply, because they've come up with a contractual agreement to do business, and that supply and demand are both reserved for that future date. So they then go off the calculation here. So what we've had is, let's say that we've had units of demand equivalent to 60% of the total supply in the market. Now that's a huge huge markup. I'm pretty sure, because I think Airbnb claims that only 11% of their bookings or listings are ever really booked. But then the thing is, there's probably a bunch of bookings or listings that aren't even like really truly available because they've got the dates blocked by default, but they're still listed as available for book. And so the stats aren't clean. Okay, so we have to be hypothetical here. So let's say 60% of all available supply has been pre-booked for today through the next 3 months, right? Today through the next 2 months. And so what we just experienced here is we experienced a situation where people now, they either do not want to or cannot travel. And there's a difference here between wants to and needs to, right? So there are people who are traveling because they want to. There's people who are traveling because they need to. Now, people who need to travel are probably people who are like coming in for business, conferences, people who are going to see family, like for a funeral and stuff like that. And they're obligated to come to the city or wherever you are. People who want to travel are people who are going for a trip, for like a concert that they booked, or like for like a wedding or something like that. There's other things that are a little less like have to be there. So there is distinctions here, and the way that things like this affect wants to and needs to are completely different. Right now what we're seeing is a drop-off of mostly want and some need. And so what Airbnb did is they gave people an out because they don't want people feeling like they have to travel when they no longer want to travel. And so they gave everybody like 100% refunds. And by doing that, a lot of that inventory, let's say like 90% of that 60% went back on the market, right? So as the last 3 months went by, we've kind of like aggregated all of this demand and supply where they all booked with each other, right? And now what's happened is that 3 months of demand that's gotten eaten up, that 3 months of bookings that have happened, and that took all the demand or all the supply off the market. Now, over the last week, people no longer want those dates that have been previously reserved. So when they undo their reservation, the demand doesn't go back on the market because the demand is what's disappeared, and it released the supply back onto the market. So now what we have, instead of having 40% of Airbnbs available right now for today through the next 2 months, we've got like 90% or like 80-something% of all Airbnbs are available from today over the next 2 months. So now the ratio between current like demand for today, tomorrow, the next day, the next month, the relationship ratio between searches and availability is much more drastic, because we've had people booking over the last 3 months that just undid it, and they basically turned back time. So now hosts are left, holding the bag on this, where they were expected, like coming into April, a lot of hosts are like 60-70% occupied coming into a month like April, where now they're 0% or 5 or 10 or 20% occupied coming into the month. Now there isn't a jump in demand yet, and it could actually happen. Like, let's say all the travel restrictions that have gone into place kind of like dry up, and let's say we get past this epidemic and people feel more comfortable to travel. Well, people who wanted to travel in April or May who canceled, if we can get through this before mid-April, then people who wanted to travel will all of a sudden want to travel again, and they won't want to miss out on the plans that they originally made. So that demand could re-enter the market, but every day that passes, all possible demand for that day goes away because you can't sell yesterday. So we've got a problem with that. This week is not the worst week. I'm going to tell you that I personally believe that next week will be much more brutal, and the week after that might be as brutal as well. And here's why. Like word on the street, domestic travel might cancel this weekend. And cities have closed restaurants and bars, which make things not fun. So people's desire to go anywhere is kind of gone down. People are kind of psychologically coming into the zone where they're just going to choose to stay at home. So unless they have to travel, unless there's a need, they're not going to. So what we can still book right now is regional need. Even when airports shut down, people can drive between cities. People coming from Houston, Austin, Dallas, between the three, we'll still see some regional need-based travel. But the moment that they quarantine off a city, which I pray to God that they don't do that, but it could happen. Let's say they quarantined off Manhattan. It's almost like, the Dark Knight Rises kind of situation. Then people can't get in and out of the city. There's no longer any regional travel even for need-based things because you're not allowed to travel. Even if you wanted to, even if you had to, you couldn't travel. Now, so that could vary, their level of restriction could vary. I've talked to people who've mentioned how these types of quarantines have gone in different countries where a member of the family is allowed to leave once every few days or once every week to go buy things that they need to and then bring it back home. So I don't really know how this would go. Those of you who understand that type of, if you've lived in a country that's quarantined people into their homes, if you know anything about the mechanics of that, if you're a scholarly professional, please add facts to the comments here. And I will pin a smart person's comment to the top so people can find it, because people need the facts and the truth. And so what we have here is we have all this accrued demand and all this accrued supply that have met each other, where the demand is falling off, the supply is going back onto the market. And because of that shift in ratio between supply and demand, the most affected dates are like today, tomorrow, the next day. We have almost no time to get a new customer. So there's three numbers here that matter. There's supply, there's demand, and there's time to arrival, I would say. And all three of those numbers affect your price, right? And they affect and the total number of views. So the demand will equate to views on Airbnb. It's a good metric. How many views per day is your listing getting? And so let me show you a performance tab so you can see that. So the number of views per day that you're getting is like a way to gauge demand. And supply is like how many total listings are available for each day. Remember, demand is by day. Door per day is a unit. So think of it like a big grid, almost like the multi-calendar on Airbnb, because there's a vertical and horizontal columns. And then how many units of supply are in between today and the day you're considering changing your price on would be really your buffer window for how long it would be until you could get booked or have to get booked. Now, if there's a healthy amount of views per day, 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now could get booked. The only variable now is the views per day weighed against the how many listings are on the market. So let's say there's on average 100 doors per range. So let's say there's on average 100 doors per area, and there's 100 views per day. And at 100 views per day, 100 doors per area, in 10 days at a competitive price, you could get booked, right? So let's say that those are just hypothetical numbers. 100 views per day, 100 doors in an area, you need 10 days to get booked. Well, so now you put those into like an equation. Whatever that true equation is for your market is going to be different than for my market, but you should be aware of the mechanics of this. So now let's say instead of 100 doors per area available, that's bubbled up to like 500 doors per area. Well, now at that same price point, over 10 days at 100 views per day, you are 20% likely to get booked because there's 5 times the supply, right? So now you need to start making some adjustments. Well, unfortunately, we don't even have the 100 views per day anymore. We're probably more like 80, 85 views per day. So now we've got 500 doors per area, 85 views per day. And so now you have 15% less demand. You have 5 times more supply for the day in question. And you still have the same amount of time. You are then going to adjust your rate. I am slashing my same day price, like today. My prices that normally get booked today for I'll normally have like say 10, sometimes like, so maybe from between 0 and 40% of my inventory available same day, depending on what season it is. So let's say, 10 to 40% availability is what I typically plan for same day. And then I'll price my listings to have a same day arrival. Well, the price I've been dropping it to in any other scenario, I'm dropping it like an additional 30%. So I'm slashing my prices 30% more than my typical bottom in order to make sure that I get booked, considering that there's been this reintroduction of supply that's no longer held on reserve. So you're going to need to do the same thing for your todays and your tomorrows and your next days. You then need to think critically about this coming week and next week and what your price point should be, considering how many views you expect Airbnb to be getting, and how many listings are available. We've talked about in past videos about going multi-platform and doing stuff like that. And if we go in under like some situational form of quarantine and if airports get shut down, then there will be less demand because the ability to travel will get taken away. So the next 2 weeks, because if airports shut down on Friday, Saturday for 2 weeks, the next 2 weeks, people coming in for those days could become very, very much barren. And you're going to be focused largely on regional travel, people who are traveling for work because they have to. So if I were you, I would try to get the next 2 weeks booked like right now. And hopefully you can pick up like a monthly stay. If you have to slash your prices to pick up, let's say you have a lot of listings, like I have 100 listings. Well, let's say you have 20 listings. And let's say you have 18 listings available. Like you have completely open calendars and 18 listings. Well, now you have the risk of like losing all of this money on 18 listings. So it might be smart for you to take monthly guests on 5 of them, even at a small loss. Because what you've done is you've gone from 18 listings to 13. And if you cannot become profitable on your portfolio and you, let's say you completely flop on your portfolio, at least you didn't lose 100% of money or 90% of money on all 18. You've lost 90% of money on 13, and you gave people 5 monthly doors at like a 10% loss. So in this way, if it got really, really bad, if it got that bad, you're controlling how much money you're losing. It's so weird to think that you as a business owner have to play that game, but it's a reality of how hard this situation could be for you. I would love to say, hey, here's how you can maximize your profits in this scenario. But for a lot of you out there, realistically, it's about minimizing your losses. And sometimes being the first person to give somebody that level of discount will guarantee that you'll get booked. And then if it picks back up, right, let's say it gets better, the 13 remaining listings that you have, if you can squeeze out a bit of profit, well, your insurance plan with the 5, you can make enough profit to cover your losses on those 5. I'd rather have to work a little harder to break even in a winning environment than to risk losing it all in a losing environment. So this is the way you're rolling your dice. If you have any questions about this, let me know. We need to have a lot more conversations about this. Airbnb hosts need to be better educated on the mechanics of supply and demand and short-term rentals and occupancy and revenue management. This is all stuff that you guys should know. And I understand Airbnb can't be the ones to teach you guys because they've got to really say, we're just a software. We're not enabling people. We're just providing people the ability to at their own peril. And so they're not going to teach you. So that's what Airbnb Automated is for here. So I look forward to giving you as much as I possibly can. Now, like I said, I'm going to give you as much as I can understand, grasp, and then digest for you. So if there are any of you out there who are revenue management professionals in the hotel industry, tenured ones, if there's any of you who really know the economics of quarantining cities, and you want to be heard because you have value to give, put it in the comments and I will bubble you up with a pinned comment. So thank you all for watching Airbnb Automated. Stay prosperous, stay safe, and I'll see you on the other side.
Hi.